Welcome to It's Been How Long? The podcast about Cherry Hill High School East students from the late 1970s and early 80s. This is Kara Siegel. So I'd like to welcome in Melissa Kenig to the It's Been How Long podcast studio. Hey, Melissa.
Tara, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Oh my gosh, this brings me back. It's crazy,
Yeah, yeah. Well,
crazy. I've
thanks,
been
thanks for thanks for being agreeing to be on the podcast with me.
I've been so enjoying your podcasts, and I've watched at least the ones that are up there because I subscribe, and it's been a lot of fun to watch everyone, and then learn about what everyone's doing, and even before we get started, I just want to give a shout out to Robin Garland, who I think probably doesn't remember me, but of course she had some prominence. But thinking of her and her situation, and I just want to let her know that she's in my thoughts. So
That's very
yeah,
nice. So here we are, 44 years for you after graduation. What are
that's
you up
right.
to? What are you up
Uh,
to these days?
I just retired,
Oh,
or
congratulations.
semi-retired. Let's just put it that way. I'm looking to do some passion projects, and we can get into that later. But as of March of this year, it's the end of March, I stopped working. And so I am now pursuing some passion projects and heavy into that, and then start a program at Harvard September, a couple weeks, 2 weeks, I think. I start that program, and it's called, are you ready? Learning in Retirement. So if you ever want to feel old, join a program that's learning in retirement.
Well, that sounds exciting.
Yeah, it is. I'm excited.
So how do you have fun with your time now that you're retired?
Well, I've it's interesting. Traveled a little bit to see family. Want to have some plans to travel a little bit more, perhaps abroad. Although for my career, I traveled quite extensively
Hmm.
abroad. And I've taken up in earnest crocheting, which shocks the living daylights out of me because when we were younger, crocheting was not a thing. And then my daughter, my youngest, came home from college and she was crocheting. And she said, yeah, my friends are showing me how to crochet. And so we just started a crochet fest. So I've been crocheting in earnest and started with a nutritionist and started working out. And so I guess, turning more attention to taking care of myself, of course. And then, getting ready to start the program in the fall. So I'm pretty excited.
That is exciting. So, you mentioned that you got a lot of opportunity to travel. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Where have you gone? Where did you love? Where would you go back?
Well, I've been mostly to countries in Europe and some Asia. So I've been to Japan a couple of times, to China. But for the most part, I've been to, I did a lot of work in the Netherlands. A lot of
Oh,
companies that I worked for, ironically, had strong associations with the Netherlands. And the last company I worked for was a Dutch company. So I had a lot in the Netherlands. I've been to Belgium and Czech Republic and France. And let me see if I can think of them all. Um, and I've been to Spain and I've been to Slovakia, I've been to Austria, I've been to,
wow.
oh my gosh, I know I'm forgetting a whole bunch and I feel so badly that I'm forgetting them. But I've been to a bunch. I would definitely, Czech Republic was awesome,
Okay.
super awesome. I do like the Netherlands, but I've been there so many times that it's actually comfortable. Oh, Poland is the most recent one that I went to, and that was
Oh,
the biggest surprise. And so now I'm on a mission in my new phase of life to see if I can find my family.
oh,
So
okay.
I'm dipping a little bit into genealogy, although I have to admit I'm not very good at it at all. And so I need to hone my skills. But I know both of my grandfathers supposedly emigrated from Poland. And the town that I operated out of, I built my team in Poland at the behest of the company I worked for, and the town is called Łódź, but it's spelled Lodz, but it's pronounced Łódź.
Hmm.
And that town housed the highest um, percentage of Jews in all of
Mm.
Poland, more than Warsaw by percentage. And as it turns out, it's also the town that has the most, it's known for its arts and arts education. And to make it even more interesting, the town became very popular in the late 1800s and early 1900s because it became a big manufacturing town, and they manufactured textiles. And it was a Jewish family that owned that textile business. It was a huge business that went bust after World War I, and that's another story for another day. But and it turns out that one of my grandfathers was a tailor here in the United States. So I'm trying to figure out if there is an
Connection.
association. And it turns out that I can find a whole bunch of Kenigs in Poland in general and in Łódź in particular, but I still haven't found yet that connection. But yes, so I've been to all those places, and Poland is surprisingly interesting and great, and nothing like what my memory was of studying the Holocaust when I was younger. Yeah.
Sure. So is
Yeah.
there a place that if someone hasn't traveled like me, and wants to go, you'd say, okay, here's what I would say, go here.
Well, I think I've been to Italy too, and now I'm just remembering. Italy was fun, by the way. I would break it up. I would break it up into parts of Europe that you would go to. Otherwise, I think it's too much.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
each area is so rich with history and scenery. So Barcelona was gorgeous and Mediterranean and, beautiful, and lots of history steeped there. And then you've got the more eastern countries, so the Czech Republic and Slovakia and Austria and that whole group. I haven't been to Germany, which is very surprising since I've been all around it. So I would do that as a group, and maybe even the Netherlands. And then I would do Italy. I'm going to go back to Italy because I could spend. There's many places I didn't see in Italy, and I would, even though Italy doesn't have a lot of commerce, I would love to have a place in Italy because it's just such a cool area. So I loved Italy, the wine, the cheese.
Good to know.
Really, really great. And then if you really like Asian, I personally, this is just me, and I've been friendly with people who don't feel this way, so take it for what it's worth. But I loved Japan. I've been there a few times, and it's so interesting because it's just so diametrically opposed to our Western way of life. And even though Europe is different, when you go to Asia, you really feel that difference. And it's very, 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 very interesting. And I could explore Japan quite a bit because it's just so interesting and so different than our way of life. Yeah.
Well, that's really
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
So I would go to all of them.
Yeah.
Czech Republic was, by the way, one of my favorite places.
Okay.
One of my all-time favorites. And I haven't been to Budapest or Hungary. I haven't been there yet. So take that for what it's worth. Yeah.
So what did you enjoy doing back in high school?
Well, I think I was in high school much quieter in terms of I wasn't very prominent in high school. And I mostly was part of BBYO and the youth group. And that's mostly what I did, but just as a participant. And then I don't think in high school I was part of this. I think junior high was on the bowling club. I remember that. And I didn't get into any sports till more post high school. So I mostly did academics and the youth group. That kept me busy almost every weekend, at my recollection. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, so what sort of post high school sports did you get into?
So I really got into long distance biking, road biking.
Nice.
I had a colleague at work, one of my jobs, who was really into it, and I was really into health and fitness at the time and wanted to, lose weight and do all those kinds of things. And he got me hooked on the biking. So we used to go on these long distance bike rides, and I really, for quite a few years, enjoyed biking quite a bit. I still have my Le Mans bike, and really, really, really enjoy it. And interestingly enough, I have a nutritionist now because I'm still on that kick. I have a nutritionist now, and she was a long distance biker, and we both agreed that at least for me, at least at this stage of my life, I'm not really willing to share the road with cars and myself on a bike, but trails, are fine. But yeah, I really loved it.
Yeah,
Really loved it. Yeah.
that's great. Did you have a job back in high school?
That is a funny question. I did a lot of babysitting and I think I did telemarketing.
Oh, really?
I sold the Philadelphia Inquirer on behalf of St. Jude's, I think.
Oh, wow.
I think. Do I have that right? But I definitely sold the Inquirer, and the hook was a portion of the money would go to the hospital. So that was I didn't have any other job that I can recall unless someone bats me over the head and tells me my memory is gone. Yeah. That's what I think I did when I was in high school. And I
That's
drove
great.
my car because that
Mhm.
was important,
Yeah.
and went for French fries and brown gravy at the diners. But yeah.
So, maybe tell us a little bit. You did graduate actually. You're part of our class, but you actually graduated a year early.
Yes,
And
that's my confusion when you said 44. Yes.
yeah, and so my next question is going to be, what did you do after graduation? But first, can you explain to us a little bit about how you came to graduate early? Because I found that fascinating.
Yeah, I didn't actually graduate early. I left early and
Okay.
got my diploma same time that you guys did, pseudo same time. So what happened was, if you remember, which I'm sure you do, our school was very overcrowded. Don't go through C Wing if you're trying to get anywhere, right? Because until the bell rings, you're not getting to your class. So our school was very overcrowded. And one day, and I don't remember all of the details, but one day, it must have been a assistant principal or something came to me and said, "Would you consider leaving after your junior year?" And I said, "No, why would I do that?" "Well, then you could start college early, you could do this, you could do that." And I said, "No, I want to stay and enjoy and whatever." And I went home and I told my parents, and I said, "No, there's no way I was going to do this." And my father started to convince me that it might be a good thing. And I just said, "No, no way, I'm not going to do it." And then I don't remember the details of the circumstances, but I think I was either getting bored or some things didn't go my way. I just remember getting this feeling of, oh, maybe I don't want to hang out, for my senior year. And this, of course, I was only a junior. And I went back. I don't know how much time between the time they asked and I went back and said, yes, I'll leave. And so I applied for early admission to college and I got in. And then the deal they told me was, when I finished, there was 4-year requirement for English and for gym. And when I finished my first year at college and proved to them I took those two, they would give me my diploma. And then they promised me they'd put my picture in the yearbook and call me for graduation, none of which happened. And so I just kind of disappeared, I think, and started college a year early. Yeah.
So, what did you do after you graduated?
You mean like
Where'd
after
you go to
college?
school? Yeah, where'd you go to
Oh, yeah.
school?
I went to undergrad. I went to Drexel University, and I
Okay.
didn't go to grad school 2 years later, but I got my MBA from Penn State years later. Um, and I got my Bachelor of Science degree in communications. And then right after college, I got married to my first husband, who's Steve Harvey, which you may or may not know from our years at school. And that we moved up to New Hampshire to start his job. He got a job after college, and so his job was up in New Hampshire. And then I became a reporter, a beat reporter, working for a local newspaper. Yeah, that's how I started.
Okay.
It
And then
was
from there,
so my career's been very interesting. The majority of my career, I would say the common theme has been education. And I've leveraged education services when it was for-profit companies to help their customers learn their product lines. And so I would make businesses out of education services and help differentiate companies. And I did this in the high tech sector started out with working for Bentley Systems, which is right there in Pennsylvania, doing that for years, and then moving into the healthcare industry, healthcare tech, into healthcare informatics, and even healthcare systems like MRI systems, and so manufacturers of those kinds of systems. And then in a parallel track, ironically, I started working with the neurodiverse populations, some of which is a personal connection. And I started a nonprofit to help folks who are neurodiverse gain competitive employment when I was in Minnesota, because I moved around the country. So I've been in New Hampshire, back in Pennsylvania, Minnesota, California, and now in Massachusetts. And so I had this parallel track where I was helping this neurodiverse population. And when I was out in California, I was asked to be a board member of a private school helping neurodiverse students. It was a phenomenal school. That school fell on hard times, so I left my job at their behest and request to help turn around the school. And that's what I did. And then I got back in the tech sector, the healthcare tech sector. And that's where I ended my career. And so when I say I'm sort of looking for these passion projects, I'm looking to get back into probably the disability community to see what I can do to help either organizations thrive who service them, or even service them directly, because that's really where my heart and soul live. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's
Yeah.
great. So was there a class or a teacher at East that, influenced you at all?
There were
Beyond?
a couple of them, but one of them is, I think, going to be a little bit ironic, and I wish I could remember this teacher's name, but my algebra teacher, Mrs. began with a D. Dunes. I cannot remember her name. It was a longer name.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it was Dunesburg or Dun. I cannot remember.
Okay.
Anyway, she was a math teacher. Math was at heretofore, before that class, was not my forte. And I got very frustrated by math, which really, much to my father's dismay, because he's, very academic and very math oriented.
Okay, so
And
just as an interjection, I have a
yeah,
Dunifi,
do knife,
Dunife.
do knife.
There you go.
Good job. Thank you, Mrs. Do Knife.
There you go.
That's who it was. She's a math teacher, yeah? Yes, Mrs. Do Knife. Thank you. So Mrs. Do Knife was great. And I remember I had her several years. And I had her for geometry and algebra. And she just changed my life, because it clicked. And I realized that I actually had an aptitude for math. So much so that when I got to college, this is the irony of all ironies. I was in a communications field in college, art and communications. And at Drexel at the time, you had to take all courses, and you only could get a Bachelor of Science. There were no Bachelor of Arts degrees. There are now, but there were not at the time, because they were very engineering oriented, science oriented. And so they insisted that you get that Bachelor of Science degree. So I had to take, all the math courses and all the other courses. Anyway, I signed up to be a tutor, and they just do it randomly, and they assigned me to tutor engineering math. But in that school, engineers took a different math track than non-engineers, and I was a non-engineer, but I still tutored the engineering students. And what I would do is I'd read up on their books and get their assignments and go tutor the kids so they could pass the class. So it was just, Mrs. Do Knife changed my life, and I ended up, in that education space all my adult life. So I really give her, believe it or not, the credit for turning things around in my head, at least. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Wow.
I learned I could learn. Yeah.
That is a valuable lesson for all of
It's a
us.
valuable lesson, and I do credit her. And I don't know if she's still around, but thank you, Mrs. Do Knife. She put
No.
up with me. She had a lot of patience with me. Yeah.
So did you have a high school sweetheart?
No, I don't really think I had a high school sweetheart. I dated a little bit, and then Steve at the end of my high school years. Yeah, when we were going out.
Okay. And do you have kids?
I have 3 kids. My oldest is, she's 39, believe it or not. And she's out in Seattle, Washington. And has a home and a significant other, and I think she's a stepchild. And then my son is in California, and he's 38. So my first two I had very close together. And then I have a daughter from my second marriage, and she's 21. She's almost 22 weeks, weeks to be 22. And then she was born, actually, interestingly, September 30th, 2001. And if you remember, 9/11 was in 2001, and
Yeah.
I was due on the 15th, and 9/11 obviously happened on the 11th. So that was an interesting year for sure. And I was still in Pennsylvania at the time. And she's currently begun her senior year in college. Yeah.
Yeah. Very nice. How did you meet your current spouse?
My current spouse. Well, this is also interesting. So he, when I was getting divorced from Steve, I was actually going on for my master's degree, and I had to quit that and start work for obvious reasons. And I started in this place, and they were hiring all these new people, and I came on board. And then a few weeks later, he came on board. So I met him at work. And that's a very funny story, but an interesting story. But yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So do you have friends from East that you're still in touch with?
I wouldn't say that I'm close as an adult with anybody. I moved around so much, but I've reconnected with a lot of people on Facebook.
Yeah.
So I've reconnected with Judy Katz, Debbie Braden, you a little bit, Lori Goldstein, who's now Lori Kruger, although we don't talk very often, but I did reconnect with her. Trying to think of who else I've reconnected with, but there's nobody that I'm close with, unfortunately, very sadly,
Yeah.
from those times. Judy Kastenberg, trying to think of who else. I know I'm missing a bunch of names, and I'm sorry if I'm missing. David Janofsky, we reconnected on Facebook, and I know he performs quite a bit down in Florida. Yeah, those are the only names off the top of my head, unless I look at Facebook and kind of see. I feel badly. I'm probably forgetting people that.
I think we will all understand, as we all have fleeting memories at times.
Sorry, guys. Oh, and Ellen Bass and Nancy Bass, and I'm trying to think of all the other people. Yeah, there's a bunch of people. Yeah.
Any like particular standout memory from high school? You know that you think
Well,
about.
one is the swimming pool that
We didn't
didn't
have a swimming
exist.
pool.
Correct. So the big joke to freshmen was to tell them to go see the pool, and then they drag you into the bathroom. So it was the swimming pool.
Uh,
That I remember. The other thing I remember is, and I'm trying to think if this was high school, and this is terrible that this is what I remember, but I remember there was some kind of an anti-Semitic
hmm.
kind of inertia that was going on, that started with a fight on a school bus, my school bus.
Mm.
Wasn't with me. I was
Hmm.
incidental and observant. I did not participate. And I remember it got carried through in the school. And that was a real eye opener for me, because I had never experienced something quite that overt. And it eventually fizzled out, but that was the other thing that I remember. And then I remember people pulling pranks in their lockers. If you remember that, like, there would be pranks in their locker, and someone would put something in the locker, and then it would come out. But other than that, I don't really remember. The only other thing I remember, and this is actually funny, is I remember getting called down to the vice principal's office, who I had no idea who he was. I can't even tell you who he was today. I just remember this incident. He calls me in his office, and he said, I've not seen you before. And I was a good kid. I didn't do anything wrong. He says, I've not seen you before, but I've got a record of you not being in class, but being in homeroom on some particular day. And I said to him, why would I sign into homeroom and then not show up to class? Wouldn't I not sign up for homeroom if I wasn't going to be in class? That doesn't make sense. He said, I don't know. And he was very distrustful. And of course, he saw a lot of kids, you know. He said, what if I call your mother? What is your mother going to say? No, this was all news to me. I said, call my mother. She's going to tell you I was in class. I mean, I don't know. I'm telling you, I was in class. Oh no, it was the opposite. They had me absent in homeroom, but showing up for my classes. And that's when I said to him, why would I show up for class and then cut homeroom? Who in their right mind would? Anyway, that's what it was. And so they call my mother cold, you know, and this is before cell phones, as you know. And, you know, it's like, call my mother. She's not expecting the call. I'm not texting her to tell her a call's coming. So she has no heads up. And he said, do you know your daughter didn't show up for homeroom? And she said, did she show up for the other classes? Yes. Well, then she was there. Well, okay. And she said, your mother said then you were there. I said, I told you I was there. I don't know what to. So I got home from school. And my mother said, what was that about? I said, Mom, I have no idea. I have no idea why someone would cut homeroom and show up to class. It just makes no sense to me. I don't know. And my mother said to me, you know, I will always back you up, but don't lie to me. That's what she said to me. And that was my only sort of run-in in any way, shape, or form with the administration. And it was over nothing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably why they picked you to leave school early. You were a troublemaker. That's what it was. You're
Can you imagine?
You cut homeroom once and that was it, man. You're
Can you imagine? I mean, this is a true story. Somehow they didn't get my name because, you know, the teacher would look up and go down the rows and look up, and you sat in alphabetical order in homeroom and stuff. So I'm sure I was leaning over talking to someone. It's not like I'm tall, so it's not like you're going to see me towering over people. I'm very short. So I was like, who knows, right? But just, guys, use your head.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably why they asked me to leave. You're right. Troublemaker that I am.
Exactly. Yeah. So have you had a chance to be back in the building? And if so, no? Okay.
I wonder what it would feel like if I went back in the building, because I'm sure what I remember is different. I mean, I remember the front doors. I'm walking in and we had the pay phones on the
I
main
bet you those
entrance.
aren't there anymore.
I'll bet they're not there, but do you remember the pay phones that were there? And then if you went left down the hall was like the nurse's office and all the administration was there. And then it was C Wing.
Yeah.
And you went straight down C Wing, and then everything, you know, kind of went off. And then if you went right, the auditorium was there, I think, and some other, the gym and, you know, some other things. I remember all of that. And I remember going up the steps and going up certain wings and classrooms, but that's about all I remember. So I would imagine if I went back, it would feel very strange and would look very different than my recollection of it. Yeah. So no. Okay. Have you?
I've been to the parking lot.
I saw that.
My kids, yeah. And actually that was the most recent one, but my kids, each of my kids had an opportunity to learn how to drive because that's where I learned to drive. And we would go up and see my parents every year. And when it was your turn, you know, you got to drive around the parking lot. And the potholes are still there. So
well, I remember having an accident right in front of the school.
Oh, okay.
So I was driving. It was a rainy day. I was driving and I had passengers in the car. And there was a school bus, 2 cars in front of me, a school bus had stopped. It was right in front of East. And the car behind the school bus stopped. The car behind that stopped. I stopped. The car behind me stopped. But the car behind them
did not.
Barreling through. So hit my car, which was I still remember the noise. It was a big surprise, right? Because the car behind me got accordioned.
Yeah.
And I had a big tank. I drove a Buick Electra 225 cream colored. And I jolted into the car in front of me. So I had a dimple literally on my back bumper and nothing on my front bumper. And the guy in front of me also didn't really, but the poor guy behind me got sandwiched in between us. And I had this tank and that was it. So that's my other memory. So most of my memories, unfortunately, I've probably tried to erase from the classes badly.
So, Melissa, is there anything that you wish classmates knew about you back in the day, or you want to tell them about you now?
Well, I'd like to think I evolved a lot since back in the day. I don't think I was very self-aware, or at least my perception of myself, or generous. Again, my perception of myself. But since then, I mean, I think, um, first of all, having kids changes your life, obviously. But I think the reason I want to follow my passion project and work with the disability community is because my son, has autism, and we didn't get him officially diagnosed till he was older. He has what was known as Asperger's syndrome, although they started to eliminate that label, much to his consternation. He doesn't like that. But anyway, and while we did okay through school, he's highly intelligent but struggled with executive functioning. When he went to do post high school, post college kind of life, things started to fall apart. And when I tried to get him help, there was no service at the time. Remember, he's 38 years old. There was no service at the time that catered to people like him. And I started to try to get services for him. And I brought him out to Minnesota with us because he wasn't doing very well. And most of the people that wanted to give him services either wanted to give him services that were well beneath what he was capable of doing. And I said, there's no way he's going to do that. Or they just wanted to put him on Social Security disability, right? And I said, but I said, what for? Well, I'll have money. I said, for what? He can live. And I said, but what is he going to do, all day, every day, right? So anyway, long story short, I got so dismayed that I started my own nonprofit, and we built up services specifically to help that population, and then got other service agencies certified in this methodology. And it was the absolute best thing one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it changed my perspective completely. He's changed my perspective from the time he was a little boy, because he was different, but beautiful and wonderful. And working with people who have, different types of challenges really changed me. And I carried that with me. I think something that, when you asked me as a youngster, would have no clue to have that kind of compassion. I think there are people that are born that way. I was not one of them, but I definitely gained it through life experience. And I will say that there was no greater joy than actually watching him develop and thrive, and others like him. And then I ended up running a school for folks and helping them matriculate out of that school, graduate, go to college, become employed, and developing those programs, and watching that metamorphosis, and seeing people be able to climb out of being challenged and reach a level of harmony with the world around them was life changing. And that, to me, is stuck with me and will stick with me forever. And that's what I want to devote my time to, because I really feel like under-resourced, underserved populations deserve every chance to thrive, and they can thrive, and there's no reason to count them out in any way, shape, or form. So that's sort of my passion these days, and what I'm starting to get back into. I'm starting to try to get into an agency here in Massachusetts. I got myself ingrained in California, Minnesota, but when I came to Massachusetts, I've only been here for like 3 years. So I'm just starting that process now. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
No, that did. I understand why it's passion, and
yeah.
we're all better for that. So thank you.
Got into some very cool brain science as part of it, because I'd already been into brain science from educating adults as part of my advocate, my vocation, my career. And then to layer in, someone who's neurodiverse became super interesting and fascinating, and learning about executive functioning and that all of that. So yeah, it became a huge, huge passion of mine. And I've learned a lot. And, my hat's off to the people that work in those fields.
Yeah. So we're back in 1980 and you're looking out. Here we are, 40 plus years down the road. Is this where you thought you'd be?
No, no. First of all, I was clueless at what I wanted to do, except I always wanted to be a teacher. Always wanted to be a teacher. I loved my teachers, especially when I was in grade school. I still remember my teachers from grade school, and I really wanted to be a teacher. And so I ended up through a circuitous route, end up in the education space, because when we graduated college, that was really the advent of a lot of the technology that we see today, the personal computing and leveraging computers to automate a lot of things. And I became extraordinarily fascinated by it. And so after I did my stint as a kind of a journalist, and then I worked for a tech company, and then I worked for a second tech company back in the Philly area, and that's when I became fascinated with software. And so my career ended in this high tech space, which and with science and high tech and software, I would have never. I mean, I ended up coding content, and never in a million years would have thought I would have ended in the tech sector for my career, or healthcare tech, by the way, which became very interesting. And that was not in my sights at all, not
That's
even a
cool.
little.
That's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
So what's the best piece of advice you would give your 18-year-old self, or maybe you gave your 18-year-old kids?
Learn always, and never think you know more than anyone else, which of course as 18-year-olds we all think we do. But if you take that attitude, then you'll go far in life, in my opinion. So that's what I would say. Be humble. Um, it's hard to do when you're trying to survive, and I'm sure you remember getting out of college and being poor,
Yeah.
trying to figure life out. But that's what I would say. Yeah. And do follow your passion for sure. If you follow your heart and your passion, you will never be sorry.
Sound advice.
I
All
wish I
right.
had followed it.
You got there. You got there. It took you,
Yeah.
like you said,
Round and
circuitous, but you
round and
got
round.
there. You
Yeah.
got there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So calling this the Fast and Furious finish. And so did you have a favorite TV show or movie or book from back during our high school days?
I Was it high school or was it right after high school? Um, it was the movie that I still watch it is the movie with Molly Ringwald and Ali
That,
Sheedy.
is that Pretty in Pink
The
or
Breakfast Club.
The
No,
Breakfast
The
Club?
Breakfast Club.
Okay.
I loved The Breakfast Club. Was that when we were in high school? Or was that just after? Might have been just
I'm
after.
not sure, but
But
yeah.
it definitely mirrored our high school life, no question about it. So The Breakfast Club was definitely it was a big movie that I loved. What was the other question? Sorry.
Oh, no, just if you had a movie or a book or a TV show. It doesn't have to be all of them, but
Well, in high school, I don't remember. I read a lot, but I don't remember what my favorite book was. But
okay.
Breakfast Club was definitely one of my favorites. I have a feeling it was after we graduated, though. I'll look it up.
So your favorite musical group, artist, or genre of music?
Well, I loved rock. 1985, so it was after we graduated. So then I can't even answer what my favorite movie was in high school. But I loved rock, and I loved like Deep Purple and Leonard Skinner, and I still do, by the way. Queen, all those types of groups. And in fact, when I work out now, I work out in virtual reality land,
Mhm.
and I often will work out to those songs. Yeah.
So this is based on some of the interviews I've already done. So did you know Reggie Wu back in high school? I did not, but
I don't.
he was a musician who's actually his band has just had a resurgence called Heaven's Edge. You like listening to, well, I guess
Hmm.
it's more of the heavy metal or the hair metal, though he makes the joke that some of them just don't have hair anymore. But it's you're talking about music you listen to while you work out. I've been listening to some of his stuff. So
Oh, I'm gonna look that up.
yeah,
Thank you for the
Heaven's
tip.
Edge. Heaven's Edge. Yeah.
Okay, I will definitely look that up, because I do listen to contemporary music as well, but of course I hearken back to
Oh yeah.
the music of high school, all that stuff. I mean, I'll
Yeah.
listen to 60s music, 70s music, and 80s music, 90s music somewhat, but after that, my
Well
interest
then,
wanes quite a bit.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Check it out.
I
So
will. That's a great idea.
yeah.
Thanks.
So favorite place to eat or hang out? You mentioned diners. Was there a specific diner? And when's the last time you were
Well,
there? If it still
oh,
exists?
I don't think the diner still exists, but I think we used to have French fries and brown gravy at Ponzio's, if I
Yeah.
remember. Was that
Yeah.
Ponzio's?
Yeah.
But also
Yeah.
Olga's, and I
Yeah.
lived right by Olga's. So I remember going to Olga's quite a bit, and Olga lived in my neighborhood at
Oh,
one
really?
point.
So there
And
really
then,
wasn't
yeah.
Olga. I
Oh
did not
yeah,
know
I
that.
could
I
have
didn't.
told you. I could still point to the house. I know
Oh,
exactly
that's
what
cool.
house it was. And he had bars on his house, by the way,
Oh,
because he had a lot of cash in his house. So he was the only house in the neighborhood that had bars on his windows. But we used to go to Olga's, Ponzio's, and then there was Country Club Diner, I think was one of
yeah.
them.
Yeah.
But
Country.
more a Country Club too. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
Those were the three that I think we frequented the most. And like I said, I lived very close to Olga's, and those were the days when right near Olga's, there were cornfields on one side of Cropwell Road, and on the other side of Cropwell was both apple and peach orchards that we used to go to all the time, to get bushels of fresh peaches and apples, which by the way had worms in them. This was before the days of the, yeah. And those things I remember very clearly, along with French fries and brown gravy in Olga's, Ponzio's, and Country Club. Yeah, yeah.
That's great. All right. Well, I'm guessing you have no idea why we have a Western theme to our
I don't. Why is it Western?
yeah, that's my quest. I'm working on that. All right. So last thing here. Do you have anything you want to say to anyone who might be listening out there in our viewing and listening audience?
Well, since I have time on my hands now, I would love to connect with people. I think this is a hoot and fun. And, we used to laugh at people that were older and kept reminiscing. And here we are really loving it and,
Yeah.
enjoying it. So anyone that wants to connect, I would love to. I'm up in Massachusetts. So if anyone wants to come and see a lovely North Shore, um, uh, community by the water. It's beautiful and historic up here. We actually spend our weekends going to different historic sites, not just in
Oh,
the town I live in, but different historic sites. So I welcome anyone to come up. I would love it. And yeah, and if anyone has a passion project or knows of, anything with the disability community, neurodiverse community, count me in. I would love to help. And then the other thing is, I know you don't have a picture of me in that book,
right, right.
but I do have a picture, which I
Okay.
will show. Can I show
Excellent.
it?
Please do.
Okay, let's see if it'll.
There you
That
go. Yeah.
is that what would have been my high
This
school picture had they remembered me, but I was clearly forgotten. And that
because
was
you were
me.
a
And
troublemaker, Melissa.
I
You were a
was a
troublemaker. Yeah.
troublemaker. And yeah, and so that's pretty funny. And I would love to find some of the people, even, who lived on my block, because I know Eddie Denkin lived not too far from me, and some of those people would be really cool
Yeah.
to meet them. Yeah.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate all your time
Thank you.
and
And
your
when's your
stories.
interview? I want to hear all about you.
Well, Robin has completed that interview, and it will definitely go up here in the next weeks. Um, but it still needs some editing.
Oh, good. Well, I can't wait to hear all about you, and let's keep in touch.
For sure, for sure. All right.
Great.
Well,
Thanks
thanks,
for doing
Melissa.
this.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for joining me on It's Been How Long? The podcast about Cherry Hill High School East students from the late 1970s and the early 80s. A shout out to my cousin Brad Corbett, whose podcast We Weren't Friends in High School inspired me to do this podcast and whose advice and encouragement have been so helpful. Thanks also to my husband, Randy Cockdale, who read all the fine print on the podcast hosting website so I wouldn't have to. And thanks to Jeff Lyons, content consultant and guinea pig, and to Deborah Smead, also content consultant. And thank you to all our classmates who are listening in. See you next week.